get over that? I had one.
We've seen it from the front angle before, but not from this angle.
Oh my God.
あ、崩れた。
あ、いった。
見てなかった。
やばい。シェッ。ガラスめっちゃ飛んでるじゃん。
I was working in an office where I was the manager of a group of people, and we had a conference room that had a television in it, and the next thing I knew, people were in the conference room horrified about something, and they came out and got me, and I went in and looked, and the first plane had hit the first tower, and the first thing I thought was it was just a mistake, that somehow a plane lost its controls or something happened to the pilot. And the second thing I thought was that the upper stories would eventually come down and make, quite a tragedy. When the second plane came, then I was obviously already alerted to the fact that it was somebody trying to do something to get back at the United States for something.
At the time when it happened, and I was shocked. I was in total shock, devastated, and very, very, very angry.
I was actually driving into work and heard about 9/11 on the radio. And as soon as I got into work, somebody had called me over to their computer and actually saw the second plane flying into the second tower. Felt very concerned because was working on a project for the DoD at the time and had co-workers that were actually at the Pentagon and down in New York City. And just very concerned. Wasn't really sure who was responsible at the time. And afterwards, thought that it was terrorists.
I wasn't too young, but I was at work on that same day when my boss man told me that he got the news that a plane struck the first tower. And then we went on the roof to see what was going on. About another 10-15 minutes later, we saw the other towers just disappearing slowly from the sky.
I was in college as a freshman, a first year at Central Connecticut. It happened during one of my classes. And then after that, we pretty much ended that day earlier. It was pretty frightening.
I think the United States responded the only way they could. First was to take care of the situation in Lower Manhattan, but secondly, we had to go after whoever it was that did it, because they took out almost 3,000 innocent lives for no reason other than that they obviously hated the United States. Do I think we were justified to going into Iran and Afghanistan? I think we sought out the people that we had eventually figured out who it was that did it, and I think we sought out those people and decided to, in a bad way, to teach them a lesson that you cannot attack the United States and get away with it. And I think that was the right thing to do.
I'm not sure how to answer that question. I mean, I think that they responded pretty well. I think that I know that the people that all jumped in New York City and at the Pentagon to help out the American citizens, I think that they responded, tremendously. Not really sure how well the government responded, and you only get clippets of what you see in the news, so get different accounts from different people that I know that were on the ground and felt that some response was lacking. No.
That question is a bit ticklish for me because of how they say that now, modern technology, there's a lot you learn going on. But yes, I would say they responded good to the fact that to help people out of the rubble and stuff like that with the police, the firefighters. They did very good. Then the mayor of New York, he responded very good and swiftly.
I think pretty well. Quite honestly, I've lost touch with it a little bit. I haven't thought about it a whole lot in a number of years. Honestly, if they were the guys behind it and that's true, absolutely.
Yeah, I think they responded well. I mean, they had to neutralize that threat and that aggression. So that aggression, unfortunately had to be met with some type of neutral actions. And I think, they acted on it pretty swift and neutralized it, as best as possible.
The impact of 9/11 varies from generation to generation because the first group of people that had to deal with it were in a situation where they were horrified and unhappy, and you had now all kinds of families that were suffering because they no longer had their loved ones. I think as the next generation comes along, you have to also deal with all of the leftover problems that there are with all of the people that were there who lived through it, especially the firefighters and the police officers who had to dig through the ruins because they've all had problems with airborne diseases and cancers and things like that. So obviously that continues to be something that must be dealt with. Did any good come from 9/11? I think it did, in the sense that it taught us that no matter what, we could be attacked, and that what happened was we decided to go and look for ways that we could help prevent that in the future. So I think that certainly is something that's good because we're making our country more secure because of it.
9/11, it showed our government that we're not invincible. There are people out there that are ready to hurt us. So therefore, they have to be on the P's and Q's so that it doesn't happen again. And they cannot take anything for granted.
I think the impact of 9/11 from generation to generation, I think it was the first time we really had besides Pearl Harbor, an attack on U.S. soil that significant. And so, in my generation, that was the second time that, we learned about Pearl Harbor in school, whereas the next generation now they're learning about, 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. And I think that the focus is just more and more on the groups, and I don't know if they really look at, I think the media kind of, plays into people's emotions into going after different groups and dividing us versus uniting us. Any good? No. The only good I can think of is people actually working together. I don't think the destruction of property or the loss of lives is worth the benefit in the future. I think there's other ways that you can get people to work together than having to go through tragedies.
Honestly, I really cannot say if any good came out of that, because I know they went to Iraq and there was a lot of loss of lives and all this kind of thing. So I cannot say anything good came out of it, to be honest. Yeah.
I almost feel like the younger generations, each generation loses desensitized a little, or doesn't feel it as much. I guess doesn't feel it as much because they weren't as part of it. No, I think some bad came from 9/11. I think government was able to go ahead and pass a bunch of laws that encroached on our privacies, and they took advantage of the situation. So I don't know if any good really came of 9/11.
So I think from generation to generation, the impact was actually very different. For people that were maybe at the time in their 50s and 60s, maybe into the 70s, those were the greatest generation. Those were the World War II people. And for them, it was a very, very visceral but natural reaction about what to do. For people that were my age, in their late 20s and early 30s, I think it was the first time that we had realized that we were actually vulnerable in the world, and that people could actually get to us. So, I look at it now in your generation, and I don't think you guys even have any idea of the impact, because quite frankly, we haven't had anything like that in 21 years. In some ways, we became better in that we're a much more secure nation. Certainly when we fly, we are much more secure. We're much smarter about how we deal with people who want to enter the country illegally or even legally and try to get after us. So I do think the intensity of our intelligence agencies and what we're willing to look at, we definitely do a way better job of that. Everyday life of Americans, has it changed? Yeah, it's changed. We're much more likely to say something if we see something, whereas before, I think if you saw something, you just let it go. And I think what 9/11 taught us is that they could do it right in our own face, and they could assimilate into our society, and we'd never know. So I do think that changed drastically. We're much more aware of our surroundings now than we were back then.
It should be taught in school, and it should be passed down by the parents, the grandparents, because a lot of things have happened. There was a lot of changes. You cannot just go to the airport anymore and be late, and you have to go for screening, you have to go a whole bunch, everything have changed. It's not as carefree as it used to be. So they should teach the younger generation what it's all about their freedom. Someone could come and destroy their freedom, or try to get the freedom away from them. We had soldiers that fought for that freedom. So therefore they have to respect it. That's what they have to respect it. So it needs to be taught, because the younger generation will not know anything about it. unless someone is spoken up and someone tell them what happened and the consequences of what happened. And we are still feeling that that effect of 9/11.
I think 9/11 is a part of U.S. history, and I think that it should be touched on. Since we don't, or I don't believe that they know exactly, who was responsible and who caused it, except for the individuals that were actually, on the planes and caught, and some of the connections behind it. But, without proof of who really was involved in it, I think that, you teach the kids of known facts, just like in the rest of history. We're learning now that history isn't always as it seems, and it depends on what side of the story is telling it, that, historical events can be portrayed differently.
That's cool. I don't have a problem with that. So the next generation now always be prepared, knowing that they have enemies out there, so they have to know from wrong to right. Okay, what is not good for the goose shouldn't be good for the gander, like the old saying says.
Yeah, I think 9/11 should be talked about in school. I think it's important. I think it's so important also to keep an open mind and try to look at all the facts and possibly not just believe in one source or one stream, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for me, I think it's a piece of history. I think you have to. The same reasons why you talk about the Pilgrims or World War I or II or Vietnam or the Cold War. You need to understand, and people need to understand what went on during 9/11. If you don't learn from history, you're condemned to repeat it. Now, what should you focus on in learning about it? I think people need to understand what the threat ended up being and what the impact could be moving forward. From a historical perspective, I think people need to understand that as a piece of history, it's the understanding what happened so that we can be better moving on. I don't understand why anybody wouldn't teach it. I don't think you have to go into all of the misery that was involved in the actual day. I think you should spend more time on, hey, this is what happened, here's why it happened, as far as here's how they were able to do it, and then talk about here's what we did moving forward that allowed us to learn from it, and why we live in America that is a safer place than when it was, on 9/11 itself.